Thanks for all for coming out. We could talk about some data. So everyone, I started, my background, I was at Colony Capital for about 20 years. So I'm an accountant by background, geek at heart. And so I was in your chair of trying to make this all work at scale at a really complicated global private equity firm. And so living through that back in 2002 when I started my career, it was like, let's clean up our data, right? And so for 20 years, we've been trying to clean up our data. Now it's more important than ever. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then Tom, I actually met there on the kind of corporate FP&A side when he was at A&M. But Tom has had many hats in his career as well. So Tom, you want to share a little background there?
Thanks, Dave. So Tom Scott, sadly, I've been in this industry for 35 plus years. So every gray hair on my head is from messy data. Started off life in public accounting with Pricewaterhouse as a partner in E&Y. Then went on to found a couple of offshore firms when offshore was the vogue. Sold one of those companies to Accenture in 2012, and then went back into consulting. I ran the real estate group for Alvarez and Marsal, doing a lot of restructuring work. And now today, one of my clients, CIA, hired me. I work for the board, restructuring and working for their affordable housing group. So yeah, I've seen a lot through my career. The evolution of ERP systems, the rise of Yardi, MRI, the fall of JD Edwards, the fall of CTI, the internet, and now here we are with AI, BPO in India, and now here we are with AI. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so on a personal note, I've been on a weight loss journey. So 2 years ago, I weighed about 300 pounds, which is a big change. But your data is a mess. Thank you. No, it's for my kids. I had a 9-year-old, inspirational moment. But I want to do an activity I liked, and so I was really heavy, really out of shape. And my 9-year-old was doing jujitsu, and I'm like, I want to do that. And I'm like, you know what? But I need to get into shape to do jujitsu. That's the trick. You never get in shape to do the thing you want to do, right? Your data is never in this perfect spot to do what you want to do. So I did the activity I wanted to do to get into shape, and it worked out. By the way, we had a great jiu-jitsu event this morning, so next conference, be on lookout for rent rollers. It's great. But the point with our data, your data's never going to be in shape. Nobody's data is perfect. Data quality exists on a spectrum, right? There is no company in the world with perfect data. Some are better, some are worse. All of it has issues. When I was at Colony, I was always so frustrated with my data. Like, why can't we get this better, all that, right? It's the process of trying to get to that better spot and having a real, a structured way of getting to it. And the nice thing now is these new tools, there's usually enough signal through the noise that this process of implementing some of these new AI tools and other methods can help you get to that better spot. So you don't need to have this very distinct, our data's at X, so we can do this. So Tom went through this. Tom in his time at Pats and other times has gone through this. When can I start? My data's not good enough. And if you want to share some of the thoughts around that.
Sure. And I've said, I've been doing this too long. My experience with Predict AP is very similar to kind of experiences I've had with just major big data cleanup projects. And oftentimes, it's, let's wait until the data gets cleaned up, right? And that was the soup du jour for a long time. And you never get those days back. And often you go on the expedition to Mars to clean up the data, and it never gets cleaned up, right? It's a big project that costs a lot of money and a lot of time, and it just doesn't yield the results. With Predict AP, and I've got other stories, with similar tools. We took the approach of just implementing it, not focusing on the vendor data, not really focusing on cleaning up any of the data. We just implemented it. And the great thing about these large language models is they learn themselves, right? So, when you put in Predict AP, you may have all kinds of errors with coding of invoices. And Predict AP will allow the model to learn on its own. So, waiting for you to get policies and procedures correct, clean up your vendor files, all those things, which sound great, are really not required. So, putting it in now, and there's also all kinds of downstream effects to it. So we put it in early 2025, and what we're starting to see now is we're going through audit and year end. is that cycle of year-end audit is totally compressed because all of the reclasses that would normally take that process and extend it by months have been done throughout the year. So there's all kinds of benefits along the way, but my message is don't wait. Dive in and things will fix themselves.
So beyond AP, what are some other areas where you see this data cleanup, on the back office side? I think back office often doesn't get as much love and appreciation, but what are some other areas you see this like, hey, we wish the data was better, but it's not, and some
tenant ledgers, right? Tenant ledgers are the epitome of poor data, and through my experience, I have implemented a lot of self-service tenant portals as an example, and in retail and office, especially in retail, these tenant ledgers are a mess. They go on for years, right? So if you have, call it Target or a tenant that's been there for 20 years, you literally will have 200 pages of a tenant ledger. And so the old thinking was, we're going to clean up all of these ledgers because we don't want to publish bad data to our tenants, and we don't want to show tenant X that they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're going to freak out. Well, through experience, what we found is if you go tenant by tenant and clean up all that data, you will be there forever. You're never going to get the system in, and your tenants are going to suffer. What we found, and one of the unexpected consequences was, publish the data as is. The tenants see the data, and this applies to residential as well. The tenants see the data. They don't want to be a bad tenant. They've got a renewal coming up, and you'd be shocked. They go in and start cleaning up their own ledger. So, some of this is, publishing the data as is. Don't try to clean it up because you're never going to do it. Sure, there are going to be issues with some tenants freaking out and saying, we owe so much money, or we don't owe this money. It's good to have those discussions. It accelerates a discussion around cleaning up the data. So my advice, this is not 1998. It's 2026. Just do it. People will forgive you.
Yeah, so it is interesting. So being on both sides of the aisle, like on the owner side and now on the vendor side, I've become, which I tried to avoid, right? So when Predict first launched, I had this fear. One of our first customers had a really challenging vendor data. And this is important when you're thinking about build versus buy is now raging back, right? Because Cloud Code's amazing, all this stuff's amazing, and the previous panel even talked about it. There's a real push to what can I do now? The technical bar is much lower, but it's not just about building a science experiment where, hey, in the ideal conditions with a very simple use case, it works, right? Because any one of you in the room can go on Cloud Code and build like, hey, I can pull invoice number due date. I can look at a very simple CAM and make that work as far as a recovery scheme. It's what do you do when the data is inconsistent or inaccurate? We often get asked, how accurate is your product, right? And this is true of any AI product. The answer is going to be how accurate is your history, because these things build off that history. And again, the reality is nobody has perfect history. It's for whatever reason, we have about 120 customers now. We found between 70 and 80% of everything is right. For whatever reason, usually people are within there. And we noticed that accuracy takes two jumps. It's because that's 70, 80%. Usually there's a lot of people involved, 10, 15 accountants, and maybe say there's 20 accountants. 15 are probably pretty good, doing good work generally. 2 are brand new, trying their best, right? They're gonna have struggles, they're having challenges. 2 have lost the will to live and are picking the first account to get home. That's the reality. Like, every company has that spectrum. It's totally true. And so what AI does is those weaker players get pulled up, right? And so, yeah, you're gonna have inaccuracies. And this is where it's important to think about your use cases around AI to clean data, because I happen to pick a problem that had a really nice feedback mechanism, which is paying bills, because nobody's gonna pay a bill without anyone looking at it. And so there is hey, we're wrong, fix it. Hey, we sold this building, we bought this building, fix it. And in that process of fixing it, you retrain the model. And so the weaker players get pulled up, and that's like step one of it. Back to the year-end audit Tom mentioned around reclasses. A lot of times, this stuff gets picked up very late in the process. The folks at the end of the process, the controllers, the CFO, whoever, has to spend their time at this very critical, either month end, where they have 2 days to close the books, or quarter end, or year end when you're doing your taxes, to then go fix those incremental bleeds that happen with that 20, 30% of issues that happen in a very time critical point. The other part of this, using the process to improve the data, is educating those folks like, hey, if you actually do take the time and make the corrections when it's happening, you're not going to have to do it in this critical time period. There's always massive skepticism. Once they see it, they start to make the changes because they're tired of telling that the person at the end of the line who understands this is tired of telling the person at the beginning, this is the change you want to make, this is what you need to do. And so once they see that feedback mechanism start to work, they start to have faith in it, they start to do it, and we get that second bump, which is not really the product of the AI, it's more the human nature of like, if I know my investment of time is paying a dividend, I'm going to do that. And so we end up, the best customers after 6 months end up kind of 90, 95%. So again, the process of doing this, should rely upon the general consensus that the group think is usually pretty right.
Yeah, in my career, I've had the luxury of, starting off in public accounting, going into consulting, running a couple of very large BPO firms in India. Now I'm on the restructuring chief revenue side, working for boards, fixing companies. And, the playbook I use is quick. Boards are bringing me in, not because of, I've been doing this a long time. They expect results. So, in the Predict AP case, it was all about cost reduction. We needed to take out, $30 million of cost in a really quick period of time. I've known Dave a long time. I trust him. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting up here. But we've known each other a long time. With Predict AP, we did two things. We implemented the product, and then we outsourced the whole group. And the reason why these tools are so unique today as opposed to years ago, we were able to capture all that institutional knowledge using the large language model and Predict AP. So the accounts payable person who's been there forever, who you can't pay an invoice without because they've got all this institutional knowledge of how invoices are allocated, how chargebacks go, all of that. It's not in a procedure manual. It's all in the large language model in Predict AP. So we were able to put the product in, take out all the knowledge, and then, I don't want to sound heartless and saying that we offshored everything, but we did it through attrition. And that two-step process works really well. The playbook I used to use was just offshore everything. And Dave and I had a lot of spirited debates about offshoring versus using AI. And I will say the AI piece of it is redoing the whole calculus of onshore, offshore. Now it's really more kind of, I know AI is super overused, but in this use case, it's a killer.
Yeah. So we're coming up on time, and I just want to just kind of end with this thought. Again, everyone, we're in the same boat. Data's not perfect. Start with think of good processes where you can use new tools to have the good data kind of reinforce that the struggling data with the feedback mechanism, be intelligent. It's a spectrum. Acknowledge that. Try to move ever closer to perfect. And it's not a point in time. I think the other issue that the trap people fall into with this is, hey, we're doing a data cleanup project that's going to end in 3 months, right? That is not it. It is not a point in time. It is creating a process that not only helps clean, but helps feed that process going forward, right? In my own company, our CRM, it's like, what's the status of a customer, live or not? We find issues, and it's like, brand new AI company, we have the same issue. And it's like, well, what's the process we can do to make sure that stays up to date? So I think that's the other key thing is don't think about this as we're going to get this clean as of now. It's like, we're going to do something that starts to improve and creates an engine of improvement that keeps going because it never stops. Because if it does, you're losing the battle. So a couple minutes left. Any questions anyone has in the audience around this? I know people love data. Okay. Well, if you have, we got a brave soul in the back.
It's amazing what $5 will get you.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is, what do you guys predict? Obviously, okay, the data is there. It's not perfect. How do you envision the ways we receive data, or I guess the third parties where the data is processed, for example, like Appfolio, a PMS, how do you envision like what that's going to look like and how that will relate to what you guys do?
Yeah, so I think, again, this gets into the reality of using these tools. They're non-deterministic, right? Which means you ask the question 10 times, you may get 8 answers. And so when you need to have a method of using it with guardrails that protects against hallucinations and has a feedback mechanism of what's actually hitting the ledger. So for us, again, we picked a really nice problem where there's a person approving payment, and when it hits the ledger, that's the ground truth. And so we're comparing, the AI, there's no humans in the loop. The AI is looking at what that ground truth was versus what the prediction was and trying to figure out, what was right, what was wrong. And it can be very nuanced. But I think that connection to the PMS is critical because it can't exist in isolation as a science project. It has to exist within the workflow of your existing systems. And without that, it's going to be a tool on the shelf and not actually useful.
Yeah, and we've got AI connectors to all of our PMS systems, Yardi, et cetera. And I give it all kinds of crazy use cases. Give me debt service coverage ratio on a property that's got a very complicated capital stack. It's got, a first mortgage, a ton of soft debt. If you don't know, as Dave said, the hallucinations that come out of that, and it will include all the debt in that DSCR, the lender is going to freak out. So you've got to have some people, manning the shop, but it'll give you information that it will give you. But if you're not, minding the store, you'll find yourself out of a job. You're going to give the wrong information. With that, and that goes for complicated things. Whether it's things like expense recoveries and CAM, debt service coverage ratios, loan to value, all of those things. You can ask these prompts; it will give you an answer. But buyer beware. You've got to check the results.
Yeah, I mean that's where judgment is still needed, right? And it's I feel like folks we're benefiting from having done this for a long time, plus these great new tools like learning math. I have a 9-year-old, right? He's learning multiplication. He just doesn't jump into Excel. He's got to learn it, and he can use a calculator, right? Same thing with these tools. You still have to have that judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I will challenge that. Throw your audits in a large language model. Ask it to abstract all the debt. Ask it to give you debt service coverage ratios. You will be amazed. The results are really amazing. And you can say, compare that to what's in Yardi. It will give you a spreadsheet and show you what the audit is, shows you what's in Yardi. But if you aren't experienced with reading these results and you don't know the noise that's inside of there, you'll get the wrong answer.
Yeah. Any other questions in the audience?
We have time for one more.
What do you think with the advent of these more advanced agentic models and people that have been kind of first movers in the space that understand an industry? PredictAP is a great example with real estate and the focus on the AP lifecycle. But what do you think is the threat for internal development that takes that experience and know-how and nuance that's needed to kind of be successful in an industry focus and kind of just be able to kind of just close that gap?
That's the question, right? So I have mixed feelings. Existential dread is one feeling. And we literally had a discussion within PredictAP. It's like, well, if someone can go take a model and be superior to us, then we shouldn't exist, right? That's the reality. And this is where we need to add value far in excess of what a homegrown solution can do. And I think there's still a large gap, especially when it comes to at scale products that need to be audit dependable with public companies in complicated situations. So we need to have honesty as a software developer around our value we're adding, right? And that's on us to be able to well exceed that. We need to be able to, and I think we do. On the customer side, there also needs to be truth and realism on what am I building, right? Because again, I think what happens on the build versus buy, and I'm a builder, right? Like I literally got so crazy about a problem, I left my CTO job and made a company. That's how crazy I am about building solutions. And I learned a lot in that process. But I think what happens sometimes is you do the science experiment, you do the quick, this very simple, one-line use case worked really well. I built PredictAP, or I built the CAM reconciliation, or I built a chatbot, or I built a lease admin, or I built a CRM. Well, maybe you built a piece of it, but that extra 50, 60, 70%, can your company depend on that part? And so I think there's absolutely 100% use cases that people can build directly that can make big impacts on reporting, on audit, on different things like that, that are very customer specific. But when it comes to a true engine and how that integrates with workflow and how it feeds back from Yardi, how it learns, how it keeps up, how you have guardrails against hallucinations, right? How you have all these different things that really get you comfort that this is like audit worthy and dependable day in, day out on millions of iterations. That is the hard part where there's still a gap. And that's on every company that I love how it's pushing all of us forward. The expectations on me are, I need to be that much better.